Thank you all very much, and thank you for welcoming me to what I consider the wrong side of the river. It's a great day today, both for New Jersey and for New York, because I think about 4 o'clock this afternoon, we're going to hear that the Super Bowl is coming to this area in 2014, and that'll be great for our economy. It'll be great for the spirit and the morale of our region. And I'm looking forward to some good news this afternoon in that regard. And given what I've had to do over in New Jersey, any good news, is okay. You take it from any area you can get it. Thank you for not only welcoming me, but welcoming my wife, Mary Pat, who is with me this morning, and also the person who is fighting the fight with me to do the things that Larry talked about, the Senate Minority Leader, who I hope by the next midterm election will be the Senate President in New Jersey. State Senator Tom Kean Jr. is here with me this morning, too. So as Larry mentioned, as you all know, we have a fiscal crisis in New Jersey. Numbers have been updated, Larry. It's a $10.9 billion deficit on a $29.3 billion budget. At 37%, it's the worst budget deficit percentage in America. It's worse than California, it's worse than New York, it's worse than Illinois, and we've needed to take bold steps to deal with it. On March 16th, we put forward a budget with $10.9 billion in reductions against the proposed spending of the Corzine administration, and not a nickel of income tax increases to close that gap. Now, this wasn't easy to do, so I want to start off by saying that while I stand firmly behind the cuts and I will do everything I can to fight for them in the legislative session that will end on June 30th, don't take that firm stance as meaning that I favor each and every one of the cuts that needed to be made. I know how painful they are and how difficult they are for a number of the people in our state. And everybody would love to be governor in a time when you can just give things away, make everybody happy, make everybody your friend. But those are not the times where I was elected and not the leadership that I was asked to provide. I feel an obligation now to stand up and do what the people elected me to do, which is, of course, to get our government under control, to start reducing the amount of money that people have to pay to the government in taxes. But if all we do is cut and we don't get to the underlying problem, we're just going to be back in the spot year after year. So let's talk about New Jersey's unsustainable fiscal course. I'll give you some statistics. Over the last 10 years, municipal spending, besides state spending, municipal spending has grown by 69% in the last 10 years. And as a result, property taxes in New Jersey have grown by 70% over the last 10 years, giving us the highest property taxes in America. This is clearly an unsustainable course. For nearly 30 years, the citizens of New Jersey have placed in the hands of politicians, mostly in Trenton, the responsibility for fixing property taxes. And in every gubernatorial election since 1973, we've had folks dancing around this property tax issue, putting Band-Aids on it, not doing a thing, though, to address the structural issues that allow politicians to hike property taxes year after year after year. We can't increase municipal aid, increase aid to school districts, increase property taxes without end. At some point, the people's ability to pay runs out. And ladies and gentlemen, we are now at that moment. With property taxes up so high in the last 10 years, people in New Jersey are now voting with their feet. They're leaving. They're leaving our state in droves. Senior citizens are leaving their homes where they raise their kids because they can no longer afford the property taxes to stay in the house. Young couples can't buy their first homes, not because mortgages aren't available, not because the prices of the homes are too high, but because they can't afford the property taxes. And middle-class families that are suffering from the 9.8% unemployment that we have in New Jersey, the highest in the region, higher than Pennsylvania, higher than New York, higher than Connecticut, are suffering too. Many of them are finding that after they've lost their jobs, they're going to lose their homes as well because their property taxes have gotten beyond what they're able to pay. In every poll you'll ever see, New Jerseyans are asked what the most important issue is, and they say it's property taxes. So how do we fix it? First and foremost, we have to impose discipline on every level of the political system, because the politicians have shown that they are either unwilling or unable to impose that discipline. So that's why our proposal starts with cap 2.5, a constitutional amendment to cap property tax increases at no more than 2.5% a year. We've been passing the buck for decades on this issue, and the public has been waiting for politicians to finally fix this problem. And the people in my state, quite candidly, have had enough, and that's the only reason I'm standing here. Because in a state with 700,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans, in a state that Barack Obama won by 500,000 votes in 2008, in a state where I was outspent 3-1 by a Democratic incumbent, I would not be standing here if the people had not had enough and were demanding change. And I ran on a very simple, straightforward set of principles. I believe in less government, in lower taxes, and empowering local officials who act on behalf of the people who have elected them, empowering them to make the decisions. Because you know, if you're a mayor of a town, you're a county executive, they know where to find you. They see you at the dry cleaners, at the baseball field, at the supermarket, and those elected officials are the ones who are most directly affected by the public's anger and their ability to reach you. Now, as you may have seen in New Jersey, that leads to a disagreement or two. And just recently, I understand that some of you may have seen a friendly little exchange with a reporter that I had that was on YouTube. But anyone who comes to this discussion talking about the issues like you can't cut this, you can't possibly cut that, those are people who don't understand that our public is at the breaking point. Those are people who don't understand that things that used to be considered sacred cows, things that used to be considered the third rail in politics, no longer are. They've been replaced by the unaffordability, the absolute unaffordability of life in my state. When we enact this constitutional amendment to limit property taxes to no more than 2.5% across the board annually, we will have put in place a foundation for getting our fiscal house in order for the first time in a generation. And with that in place, we can begin to look at what we really need to do, which is in a sustainable way get New Jersey towards urban revitalization, education improvements, and every other big picture issue. But we'll never get to that if we don't fix the foundation, because we're broke. I mean, we're broke. And if we don't fix these problems, all the rest of them will fall by the wayside as well. Now, fundamental fairness dictates that, don't just do as I say and do as I do. So on the state level, this constitutional amendment must also cap discretionary state spending at 2.5%. State spending outside debt service or aid to municipalities and school districts has to be capped at 2.5% as well. We must lead by example at the state level. We just cannot impose a cap on municipalities and not impose the same cap on us. Because the temptation will then be, when economic times get better, to allow state government to grow again out of control. Let me give you an idea of the explosive growth of government during the McGreevey and Corzine years in New Jersey. If projected spending of the Corzine administration for this coming fiscal year would have been permitted to go forward, over the last 20 years, state spending in New Jersey will have risen by 322%. That's 16% a year, every year, for 20 years. There is simply no economic model that can sustain that level of public sector growth.